Hello, my name is Iluta Lace. I am director of NGO Association Marta Centers, and this is an organization that works to support women that suffer from violence, trafficking, and also does a lot of work to improve legal acts, policies, develops prevention programs, and involves men in work against violence. So today my task is to show how domestic violence is viewed from a victim's perspective, and I will try my best to show how we have worked and what we have done from Marta Center's perspective in this regard. So you can see this is our team. Actually, we are 35 people altogether, but you can see some of the key persons here on the picture. We are already 21 years old organization. And we do have our offices in Riga, but also in western part of Latvia, Liepāja, and eastern part of Latvia, Rēzekne. Per year, we provide rehabilitation around to 350 clients, mostly women and their children that have suffered from violence. And last year, we provided rehabilitation to more than 400 persons, and it seems that this year it will be the same due to pandemic and due to different restrictions. We see that there is a huge demand for the services that we do here in Latvia. And this is a model how we work. So for us, victims' perspective is crucial. You see services that we provide are developed based on the victim's perspective. We listen to women, we listen to their stories, and we involve other specialists in the work to provide services, qualitative support for victims of violence. So we cooperate with specialists within our Marta Centers team, specialists outside Marta Centers team, in other institutions like police, prosecutors, courts, medical staff, and all kind of other specialists. And seeing how this work is done and what's good and what's not so good, we do work with our decision makers, with our parliament, with our government, and try to improve laws and policies. And every year we do have some changes, some amendments in laws. We do have some changes in programs. So for example, this year we managed to get that there are mandatory programs, obligatory programs of rehabilitation for perpetrators, so the ones that actually the ones that actually had been violent within the families. So since 1st of July, court can make decisions whenever there are protection orders issued that actually these persons have to go to rehabilitation, and that's obligatory. So we also do have research. We prepare research to argument and to have valid arguments for the works that we do, and also for the advocacy efforts that we do. So we cooperate with academics and researchers, but most of all, the voices that we may try to make heard are the voices of victims. So we do have focus groups, interviews with women, and mostly women, and based on these stories, actually we provide information to advocacy decision makers. And based on these stories, we also understand what kind of tools, what kind of methods we need to develop, and we learn from best practices around the world. We have worked with specialists from Duluth in Minnesota state and Global Rights for Women organization, and developed lots of legal amendments, but also lots of methods that can be used in our work when we provide support for victims of violence. And we have, as I mentioned already, prevention programs where we try to involve bystanders, not to be indifferent to violence, to report violence, and to encourage victims to report violence and encourage victims to seek for help. So we have also youth programs and a forum for men where we try to encourage different discussions on equality, on masculinity in 21st century, and whether aggressiveness is okay and is part of real manhood. So all kind of these things we do at Marta Centers, and we are very proud to say that actually we have had very nice cooperation with Estonia, both non-governmental organizations and ministries in implementing these different projects against violence, against trafficking. And we are very proud to have again one project together with you, Estonian partners, and in this time to provide our expertise and our knowledge on what are the best practices in Latvia, and that can be used for you to develop methods how to work with victims of violence, how to detect violence, how to understand vulnerabilities of the persons, why they report, why they don't report, and what are the issues, how to talk to victims, how to treat them so that the violence would be stopped and they could have access to dignified lives. So this is the system, the program, how it works in Marta Center, like the real work in Marta Center. Person can call to us or write to us, in any way approach us. So we have we have a helpline. Our specialist replies to these calls or emails, and the first person that the victim meets at our center, it's social worker. And social worker listening to the story, understanding the situation, asking questions to clarify different issues, realizes what kind of other experts we can involve in them from the team of Marta Center. So usually we have legal advisors, we have psychologists, psychotherapists, and also social rehabilitators, especially for the victims that are less advantaged with social skills and that have learned helplessness, or they have had different challenges in their lives that they have not learned how to be effective with different social skills. So social rehabilitator helps this person with very practical issues, like helps and goes together to shopping, helps to plan a budget for the months, helps to reach out to different specialists and assist and ease with the person when there are conversations with other specialists, because we have noticed that not all the specialists have quite that they are not empathetic to victims, and it's good always to have another person with our victims, especially if they are in very vulnerable situations and with low social skills, that they shouldn't be blamed again for the situation where they are. And we involve other specialists, usually nurses or some doctors if it's necessary, based on the situation, persons that work with addictions. And we also do have 2 anonymous flats Marta Centers has, and these are the places where we can hide victims if there are really high threats to their lives, and police or other institutions are not efficient enough to hold perpetrators accountable or hold perpetrators away, regardless all the legal measures that are used to protect the victim. So this is a system within Marta Centers how we support persons that have suffered from violence. Most of them, or majority, are women that have suffered from their intimate partner violence. And we will share how we work and how we try to understand the victim's perspective within this whole process. So first of all, we need to understand that within our heads, there are different stereotypes and different perceptions, and not always we understand the realities that especially women has to face. I think this picture actually shows the realities of most of the women that have children, that are wives, that are also active participants in labor market, that doing all the stuff what they do, it's not always that they have equal start positions and equal opportunities, because they have extra workload at home, extra duties at home, and especially if the families are based on traditional gender roles, then then women have really lots of workload at home, so their workload is not usually shared by men. What we see in Latvia, at least, that and also European Union, that during pandemia and all the restrictions that we have had, there had been some positive effects on gender issues, on gender equality. There are many more men that are involved in household duties and helping at home with household, with children, with other issues. But why I show this picture, it's really important to understand these gender aspects, to understand how being a woman or man biologically, we have extra workload or extra duties or extra expectations just being a man or being a woman. And these are very important aspects if we think about how to help the victims that is victim of domestic violence, because all these issues are also part of the story, and we have to find a way how to support the victim and how to support and how to have this gender perspective into our minds when we work with women. And also, one of the issues that we usually forget, that there are so many aspects in our public space that objectifies women. If we look at our ads, if we look at some of the articles and pictures that expose women in different way and men in different way, even if we talk about professional achievements, we actually did years ago with the Atoll Center in Estonia research about Delphi, how they portray women and men, and how they portray women. Even if they talk about some kind of professional achievements, there are pictures that are added to these articles that actually portray them objectifying them, showing some kind of exposing their bodies and showing their body parts in a way showing not so much their professional capacities, but relating to their bodies and to their physical attractiveness or opposite. So objectification of women also leads to normalization of violence and the normalizations that we can do different things to women, and that's normal. So these are also things that we should take into account, and these are the issues that are connected to these gender aspects of violence. As we know that most of the women that suffer from domestic violence are women, and of course there are men, but they are exposed to violence by their peers, by men outside family, and there are rare cases, and there are where actually their wives could be violent towards them, or their sons or their children. They could be violent towards them if they are elderly persons. So, but these are the aspects that we should take into account and understand. And when we speak with victims of violence, and if we want to understand the perspective of the victim, because victims usually they experience this power and control if they are victims of domestic violence or intimate partner violence, if we are more specific. So this is a wheel that was developed in 1984 by Ellen Pence, but how she developed this wheel was listening to stories of women that have suffered from domestic violence. And this is actually something that, again, we have to keep in our minds when we speak with victims of domestic violence, or we want to detect victims of domestic violence. Then we have to understand all these strings that a perpetrator can use against the person, and we cannot see them from outside so easily. That's why it's very important to have methods, to have questions ready to ask, and to be non-judgmental, to get out perspective of victim and to place yourself in the shoes of the victim. So if you look at this wheel, we can see that actually in most of the cases, perpetrator finds a way how to intimidate the person, how to use emotional abuse, how to, in a way, different ways, say that the person doing this or that is not correct doing this or that she's bad mother, she cannot cook, or she cooks in a way that is not satisfying. And also by time using isolation. So in a way, you can see that care of the person that was at the beginning can grow into coercive control, and in such a way that the person that could be supportive to the situation of the victim of domestic violence actually are not around this person anymore. So she cannot meet friends that could be supportive to her situation, or she has lost already friends because of the attitudes from the perpetrator and all the expectations that he has put on the victim, saying that it's not good to meet this friend, or she has such views, or it's better not to meet your family if the family members are supportive to victim. So in a way, there is only victim and the perpetrator, or perpetrator's friends that are not friends of the victim, and children in many cases that can be also used as a manipulating mechanism to control the person, blaming forever whatever the person is doing. It's a wonderful tool to make the person feel guilty for whatever she does, and she has all the time to put efforts to not to be guilty, not to be blamed. So, as I mentioned, using children and nowadays all kind of digital technologies are used to find a way how to control victim. For example, if the violent person, the man, wants that everybody serves him and does everything what he wants in the family, and he does want that woman makes the children silent, and women tries to use not probably all the nicest methods how to keep children silent, then he can film these moments and afterwards can use and threaten her that this will be used if child protection services are involved, or if custody rights should be decided who is going to take responsibility for children and so on. So this is a very powerful mechanism to control situation and to request victim to behave in this or another way. And of course, one of the issues that we have to take into account that we live in the society where we have strong gender roles, where we have specific expectations from women and men, and historically men were dominant and they had more privileges than women, especially regarding to resources, regarding access to education, labor market, money, and also privileged control women's bodies and women's situations. And in many ways and in many cultures, this male privilege is still prevalent, and it's a norm, and we don't consider domestic violence as a real crime in many ways because it's just like it is. It's women's fate, and it's women's duty to serve men. In many cultures it's thought like this, and also in our Baltic countries, in many families still this is how it's perceived, that men are the ones that decide on things and that have more rights than women and we can see it in the way how we accept violence and normalize violence and don't have proper actions, or we don't properly treat this as a crime. And these are also signs that actually we support this male privilege. And one of the issues that is really important to understand, it's economic abuse that is used within these these families where domestic violence happens. And usually, if you look at the situation of women, even if they work, they usually have lower paid jobs like nurses, teachers, and others that actually doesn't if you choose to be alone, it's quite challenging for women to survive, especially if they have one or more children. So these are actually one of the biggest challenges for women to stop violent relationships and to get rid of this perpetrator. And as I mentioned already, coercion and threats in different ways are used by perpetrators towards women, and these threats and this coercion is not usually seen from outside. And if you look at this power and control wheel, it was developed in 80s in United States in Duluth. But whenever I talk with women in Latvia or in Turkey or in Central Asia or in other countries, Norway or Sweden, and if they are done some interviews with victims of domestic violence, usually all these things are prevalent. And this control and power wheel that shows this coercive control is actual nowadays. And probably the ways how you use these threats or coercion, probably they changed, that you can use more cyber violence. You can follow or control person using their having access to their different browser stories or access to their computers or having their paroles to different also to banks and so on. These are the ways how you use this control nowadays. But all these strings, all these aspects are prevalent also right now. And when we did focus groups in Latvia, actually all these things are there. So this is a wheel that actually shows victims' perspective and victim situation, and we have to take this into account when we talk to women, mostly women. Of course, these can be also men, and these can be children, but these are the things that are used for adult persons, mostly women that suffer from the intimate partner violence. And if you look at what's going on in the head of the victim, if she thinks, oh, I don't want to be in this relationship anymore, I want to stop everything. So these are all kind of things that she has to solve, and she has to somehow take into account when she wants to stop the violence and get out of this relationship. So first of all, it's necessary to recognize that there is violence, understand all the signs, and actually how severe is this violence, and the risks to their lives and also lives of their children. Do they have any support? What kind of crisis, all the health issues that women has, and that he has acquired, all kind of health damages, what she has acquired during being in this unhealthy relationship. And it's physical health, but it's also mental health. Many of the victims have sleeping problems. Many of the victims have some kind of Stockholm syndrome. They have close attachment to the perpetrator. At the same time, they are afraid and they have fear from this perpetrator. So all kind of institutions that they have to deal with, police, their physical safety, they have to prepare these crime reports. They don't know how it will be with this legal process, custody rights. What kind of things they need to prepare divorce, how they will how they will be supported, whether they will have access to free legal advice, how to deal with stalking that will happen in many cases, and most of the cases, if there is coercive control. All these economic issues takes the huge part, like finding new home, or if it's not the property of woman where she lives, safety issues, rent, change of keys, and school, daycare of children. All these issues are on the mind of the victim. So these are the issues that she has to deal with, and we as specialists, we have to take into account this. We have to understand that these are the things that should be solved in a structured way, but we cannot request too many things from the victim in a very short period of time, because it's a lot. And think about healthy relationship, and think about yourselves. If you want to change something, start something new, is it easy? Or it takes some kind of courage to do something and to start something new. Many promises that you make yourself for New Year, like what you are going to do in different way, is it easy? Or it takes some time. So think about this situation, and think about all what mostly women face if they want to stop intimate partner violence and stop these violent relationships. What kind of issues they have to solve, and what kind of things she has to go through. So I want us to show these three types of domestic violence, and that also helps to understand the victim's perspective and the situations where they are. If we talk about coercive control, this is most of the cases of domestic violence, and if police goes to emergency calls that are related to family conflicts, it's really important to understand that most of the cases are these cases where this power and control is prevalent, and where there is this coercive control. These are the most of the cases. It's not always so that you can see this easily from outside. That's why it's important to have proper questions, to have proper actions when you are at the place. And we in Latvia, we have developed together with police a special questionnaire for our police based on the stories of women and listening to women, how the things are. Because in many cases, women said, oh, police comes, they don't see any, my body is not damaged. They don't see any signs of violence, as it seems for them, and they just open the door and see I'm quite fine, and they leave. Or I'm quite hysteric, and I'm because of the situation, and they come and they see this calm husband. And of course, they start nice conversation with him and make some friendly conversations and friendly relationship, and leaves me out of support. So it's very important that there are proper tools in place, like we have developed in Latvia, and there are also in many other places. Like we have inspired a lot from Duluth, that if police comes, they have proper questions to ask. They do have a look at the flat or apartment or house, around house, if they see some kind of material damage, if they see some kind of knives used in kitchen, or not towards women, but to threaten her. Some signs that show that actually this happened, even if the body is not harmed at all. And also to look at the women's body properly to see whether there are some signs on the women's body. So because victim is afraid, you have to, if there is coercive control, you have to take into account that there are three things that you have to deal with: fear, guilt, and shame. these are prevalent if there is coercive control ongoing. So it's called also battering. So these three types of domestic violence are the ones that our Duluth colleagues take into account when they deal with cases of domestic violence. So the most prevalent is coercive controlling, but it's not easy to see it. It's really necessary to have knowledge and necessary to understand victim's perspective. Then there is resistive violence and non-battering or violence that happens, but there is not coercive control or power and control will prevalent. But this is really short, little percentage of this. But in most of the cases, when police goes to family conflicts, at least in Latvia and also in many other countries, they perceive that this violence that happens it's both of the partners have equal opportunities, both of the partners have equal power, both of the partners don't have fear towards each other, but it could look like this. But if you ask questions and if you go into depths, you can understand that actually this coercive control is the one that is prevalent and should be dealt with. So if we talk about this coercive control, actually this is when we need to take into account this power and control wheel that shows all these little strings that can be used against women. And especially if she wants to leave, if she wants to stop violent relationship, her life is in the most dangerous situation. Then the violent person can really take some decisive action and a woman can be killed. Therefore, specialists that support women should be extremely cautious in providing support and providing access to safety for the victim, so that the perpetrator could not use all these strings that are in this power and control wheel. So, because the characteristics of this coercive controlling is that you can't leave me without being punished. So he will find all kind of ways to control person's life. And as our specialists say at Marta centers, if women have children, it is like a free ticket in the lives of women that can be used by perpetrator. So this we have to take into account and also understand that person will not be brave enough to cooperate with legal systems, with specialists. You have to take care of fear. You have to take care of shame and guilt, and also understand why person lies to you, because. This is the case. We also see at Marta centers that lies could be also one sign of this, that actually person suffers a lot, and we have to take this into account while speaking with persons, and also be ready that truth will come out gradually, not on the first session, not on the second session, but gradually. And sometimes, especially if there are cases of severe sexual violence, some of the very important details or information that could be used in litigation process comes out only like after 6 months or even a year. Understanding this resistive violence, it's necessary to understand that if you have been oppressed all the time and your demands, your needs are oppressed, you have served all the time to other person, so your anger somehow has to find a way out. And if you have used as a victim all the ways to find support, to use legal mechanisms, but they were not, the specialists were ignorant, or they didn't understand, or instead of supporting you, put you in more dangerous situation, then victim could start to resist in the ways the person find it appropriate at that moment. And as you know, many of the women that are in prisons because they found their ways to resistance, and they were illegal ways. For example, they really tried to protect themselves, or they attacked the perpetrator, but it was because they couldn't stand anymore this system where they were all the time intimidated, all the time belittled, all the time injured in different ways, harmed or threatened. So this is resistive violence. So in this form of violence, it's really unnecessary to understand that there is persistent prevalence, this power and control will aspects, but it has been for a long time. The person has tried to find out ways, legal ways, how to find support or help or assistance, but didn't succeed. And then, of course, the person tries to use also illegal force of power to respond to abusers' coercive and controlling tactics. And this is a reaction that men's violence against women can trigger. So we can see that part of the victim's broader strategy to get out of this abuse was that they try to negotiate, they try to reach out to family and friends. There was this anger and hostility, and but at the end they have to use the force and power somehow to find a way to solve, in their perspective, the situation. And then there is this non-battering, or the violence where actually you don't have fear, you have had quarrels, but probably you used illegally your force trying to solve some kind of issues, but there is no fear, and there is no guilt, and there is no all kind of aspects that are prevalent, that are existing if we think about this power and control will. So, but this is, again, I can say that most of the specialists perceive that in most of the cases of domestic violence, it is like this, and that it's okay to invite both persons involved in the conflict for conversations, but it is in rare cases. This form is in rare cases. So, for example, you decide you are quarreling about politics and you disagree about something, but you don't have fear for for your partner. So this is really in rare cases, but in many cases it's perceived like majority cases by specialists. So the shared understanding among all of us trying to support and assist victims of domestic violence is to understand that there are 3 types of domestic violence that we have to take into account: this coercive and control, battering, resistive violence, and non-battering violence. That the power of the state should be restricted to controlling the illegal activity of the offender. So we have to focus on offender, his acts, and keep him accountable for all the things that he has done, and also understand that victims are rarely free to cooperate with the system to hold offenders accountable. So this is the things that we have to take into account. And during the project, we will talk more about how to talk to victims, how to be most efficient to support them and keep them safe. And also account for power differences between victim and offender, understanding gender inequality, and also find all possible ways how to keep men, violent persons who batter and who actually are responsible for stopping their violence. So I will finish here today. but I'm happy that we will continue our project and we will share our knowledge, tools, and methods, and you can use and adapt them in the most efficient way for you, for your specialists in Estonia. Thank you.